Hello, and welcome to the Designing with Love podcast. I am your host, Jackie Pellegrin, where my goal is to bring you information, tips, and tricks as an instructional designer. Hello, instructional designers and educators. Welcome to episode 106 of the Designing with Love podcast. This is part 2 of my 3-part series with Hamza Sami, focused on right-size autonomy for adult learners in college and corporate contexts. We'll ground the conversation in Knowles Self-Directed Learning, or SDL, and Vygotsky's Zone of Proximal Development, or ZPD. Welcome back to the show, Hamza.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much.
It's good to be back.
I appreciate it, especially since you are on the other side of the world from me. You're in Turkey, so it's evening for you now that at the time of this recording. So I appreciate you taking the time and everything with your family and being able to come on the show and talk to me about some of this and have this great conversation.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
Yes. So to help us make autonomy tangible across settings, what does appropriate autonomy look like in a college course versus maybe corporate training?
Okay, so before we start comparing the college courses versus the corporate training, we can start by defining the autonomy so we are on the same page. We can simply put it like it's the ability to take charge of one's learning, the ability to be self-motivated or responsible for our own learning. So if we look at the college courses versus the corporate training, we can see that the context is different. The setting itself is different. Now, we like how college students versus the employees perceive their environment and how they are perceived by their superiors. For example, the students by their teachers, and the employees by their managers, and so on. Even if you think about it, if we think about the smallest details, the seating setting or how they sit is different. In the college, they sit in rows and they are facing the lecturer. Although we try in our center, we try to make it in a round shape or semi-round circle, so we give it this discussion vibe. As opposed to the training or if we speaking about the corporate, they sit in a desk-like areas, So, but
Right.
we can think also about different aspects when we compare the college courses and the corporate training. For example, the aspects such as the learner motivation, the instructor role, and the structure of that autonomy. Now, for the motivation of the learner in the college courses, it's usually extrinsic. They want a grade. They need a degree. But in the corporate, it's usually intrinsic or performance based. They want to, bridge this skill gap, or they want career growth. If we think about the aspect of the instructor, the role of the instructor in the college courses is facilitator, who try to nurture the self-regulated learning habits. While in the corporate training, we're talking about coach or mentor to align the autonomy with organizational goals. Now, the structure, if we look at the structure as an aspect, in the college courses, it's curriculum defined.
Right.
We have more space for exploration or reflection. While in the training or the corporate training, it's business driven outcomes. We want outcomes from the employees, so to meet our business goals and so on. So the autonomy here is within the performance and the procedure boundaries. That's why the difference in that area in the structure between the college and the corporate is they are in the college. You're allowed to make mistakes. You are allowed to take risks compared to the corporate world. What it will cost you if you make mistakes in the college? A lower degree, for example, or sorry, lower grade, what's the worst that could happen? You could fail and redo the course. That's the worst that could happen to you. But in the corporate world, you might lose your job. So that's what I learned from my college teachers, and that's what I always tell my students: just take risks here, because you might not be able to do it in your career, for example, when you graduate. So that's something to focus on. Now, to answer your question, the appropriate autonomy, how it looks like, for example, in college courses, we are speaking about scaffolded autonomy. So we give the students freedom, but progressively. For example, we can,
Right.
of course, explore it more later, but we can give like example just such as they can choose the project outcomes. For example, in media, our media students, when we ask them in a project or assignment, they can choose the medium, how they can represent or present their work, whether in graphic design, time-based like animation or video, photography, stuff like that,
Right.
we can encourage also reflection. When we encourage reflection, the students will learn to evaluate their progress and take responsibilities. So we do that also in our assignments, such as we ask the students to write a reflective journal about their progress in the assignment, especially in project-based courses. Maybe write a weekly status report. They submitted every week, and they reflect on their performance and so on. Now, in the corporate training, it's mainly task-oriented autonomy. So learners have more control when and how to learn, as long as, of course, they meet the business outcomes. For example, in our center, we do conduct trainings for our teachers, but at the same time, like two or three per term to ensure quality, of course. But at the same time, they have access to our LMS, Learning Management System, where they have the Moodles we want them to be aware of, and they choose it as they need it. It's not
Right.
like a prerequisite. They have to learn this first, then that. No, whenever they feel they want to learn something, for example, about the system, the delivery, for example, things like that. So they want to like do some skill gap learning, so they can do it anytime. So these are some brief examples about how we can what's the appropriate autonomy for them.
Right. I love that. Well, and I love, Hamza, how you set that up too, and you explained what that looks like in both settings. With the college courses and the corporate, to see the difference, right, and how autonomy is different for both settings, because as instructional designers and educators, we need to know that so that we can create the appropriate type of curriculum or the appropriate type of training, right? That's so important, because when I first started as an instructional designer, I started in employee training and development. Now I'm in higher education curriculum. So I didn't, when I first came into the higher education curriculum, or when I had applied for the job at the university, I remember when I was working with a corporate recruiter, and she said, just know that when you go into curriculum, whether it's higher education or K through 12, but she said, when you go into that, it's going to be different than employee training. And she was right. It's definitely different, and how you approach it, and everything. So I love how you talked about even the setup too, because that brought me back to when I was going to the community college. I remember the setup like that, where we were all in rows, we were facing the instructor, right? And then when I went to another university, it's for working adults. It's called University of Phoenix out here. But we would meet one night a week. We would do evening cohorts, and they had it set up to where, like what you were talking about, where they did it in a circle format.
Semicircle, yeah.
Yeah, like a semicircle. And then the instructor was still up front, but we had a semicircle so we could all have that discussion and really see each other and not just see the instructor and facing them. So it was really great. And it was also a great setup for doing group presentations, because one of the requirements that they had it, and they still have it at University of Phoenix, is learning teams, where every single class you have to work with a learning team. That's a requirement. Mm-hmm. And that, it's funny because some of my students will actually complain sometimes about having group assignments with online classes. Yeah. And I'm like, please don't complain about that. I feel like saying that to them, but I don't. But I'm like, I'm like, I had to do that in every class. And were there challenges? Of course, even in settings where we were in person, we still had issues. Like someone wouldn't pull their weight in the assignment, or they wouldn't, submit their part so we could get it together in time. So someone else would have to step up and do that. But it taught me a lot about collaboration and working together. And then it helped me for my jobs too. So yeah, it's very interesting. And then employee training, I agree with you. There's that difference there. So I appreciate you kind of breaking that down, and everything. I like that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, which setup you prefer more, the role style of like seating or setup, or the semicircle when you were a student?
I like the semicircle because it's nice to be able to have those discussions going on, and where it's not just instructor directed, where the learner feels like they're a part of the process, and it's more self-directed learning, because it's not just the instructor taking ownership of the discussion, but the students and the learner feels part of it. So I like that because I feel like I'm part of that process, and I'm able to get more out of it too as a student. So I like that semicircle best. For sure. Yeah.
Of course. It's always blown my mind how we are, like, all these years we used the same setup since for ages.
Right.
Yeah, but it's more effective to have a semicircle. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. They're, I noticed they're even doing that in elementary school now. They're setting it up so that they have little either like tables where they have the students sit around these tables as groups, or something like that. So I think they're starting to get away from that in even elementary and high school, because I think they're realizing that setup is just not conducive to learning. Because why would you want to be, because you're always going to have, I think, and I remember this in grade school and high school, you're always going to have the ones that are going to want to sit even college, the ones that are going to want to sit in the back, right? So they don't get the attention of the teacher and everything, and they don't get called on. And then you're going to have the ones that want to sit up front because they're like, I want to pay attention and I want to do really well. So, with the semicircle format, everybody's equal in that, there's no front, back, middle, it's just, we're all equal. And it's like that saying goes, we all get a seat at the table. So, I like that format. So, so hopefully those listening, can kind of advocate for that in, whichever setting they teach in or do training. And I would always advocate for that for sure.
Well, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we talked a little bit about that, how readiness varies widely in adult learning cohorts, especially going from college, to corporate and things like that. So what's one good way to assess learners' readiness for self-direction, and then calibrate those supports accordingly so that they have what they need to move forward?
That's a great question, Jackie, because it's very important to understand the learner's readiness before we start applying the principles of autonomy and the self-direction and so on. But if we define first, if we're talking about adult learners, if we define them, if we say like they are simply those aged 25 years and above. So it's not. I found out that it's not about age. alone. It's about maturity. They have to be mature. They have to have real world experience or sense of relevance, and some elements that shape learners' confidence to take ownership of their own working. And there are some ways to assess that. For example, by gradual learning. Now, I have a case I would like to share with about my students. I experienced it firsthand. Now, with our media students, we give them in the first year. There's an individual project course. Now, in this course, it's called Pearson set unit. So basically, it's set by Pearson. We have to give it as it is. The theme of the project is provided, and the topic is chosen for the students. So they just do the project. They just do the research, and they learn about project management and the execution until they produce an outcome, which is media-based outcome based on their choice. So their only choice is how to do the topic, or how to conduct their only choice is about the outcome, let's say. Now, in the second year, the theme is chosen for them. However, they need to choose a topic from, let's say, 5 topics. It's their choice. So I remember my students, they used to say, okay, we are confused. Which topic to choose? We have so many options, so many choices. So, of course, I used to sit with them and try to ask them, and we would brainstorm, do some researches, ask them questions, give them tasks to reach with them how they choose their topic. But the same students, you see how they were confused in the second year. The same students, when they went to the last year, the third year, in a degree with our partner university, it's a work-based degree. So the students should be working either volunteer or part-time or full-time, but they should have a job. In this program, our students, the same students, they are asked to do their own assignments. They have to write their own learning outcomes or objectives, and write their own assignments and do the assignments. Imagine. So imagine these are the same students. You see how they are gradually were like how to say it, like they were what's the word I can, like they gradually learned how to take control of their own learning,
right.
And until they reach to a point where they make their own, they assess themselves, they assess their own learning. Instead of we writing the assignment for them, and we assess them based on certain assessment criteria, they write their assessment criteria, they write their learning outcome. So this is an example of the gradual learning. Another example is the formative assessment, the learning while and for, assessing while and for learning. The formative assessment for students, for example, we can do a group discussion, any class activities. Then we can, like for those who have difficulties, they can do one-to-one individual meeting and give them individual tasks. For employees, we can do reflective practice. For example, I remember when we have an annual review with my learning director, she would meet with us once every year to review performance, to speak about our own performance, goals, things like that. So these also, they can give us to assess our own progress or readiness to take the next step.
Hello, I have some exciting news to share with all of my listeners. There is a feature called fan mail. What this allows you to do is send me a text message anytime during the episode. There's a link located at the top of the description in each episode, and it says send Jackie a text message. So when you click on that link, you'll be able to send me a message letting me know what you thought about the episode and if you have any ideas for future episode content as well. I look forward to seeing your text messages. Thank you. Wow, that's great. I love that. Well, and I like how you mentioned that they gradually were able to get to the point where they could create their own type of outcomes, and that's what we really want, right? That's the ultimate goal. So it almost makes me think of Bloom's taxonomy, where you have the lower order thinking skills and you have the higher order thinking skills, to where they can get to the point. I actually have this. It's laminated, but I have it was something that my coworker gave me. you would probably like it because it's a 2-sided sheet of paper. You can actually print it 2-sided, but it's 2 pages, and it has the Bloom's taxonomy on it, and it has like the old and the new on it. So, and the ones that are shared between the different levels. But then on the other side, it has the verbs to avoid, like understand and things like that. But I actually, when I got the job and I was working in the office, I noticed that my coworker had it laminated, and I'm like, that's a great idea. I love that, because if I'm going to be carrying this everywhere and taking it to meetings, I need to have something that's going to be sturdy and go with me. So now I have it here at home, and it's funny because my coworkers know when I'm ready to pull it out, because I go to the side and I pull it out. Oh, Jackie's pulling out her Bloom's sheet. And I'm like, yep, exactly. Because I want to make sure that, I used it the other day, and I was like, okay, so, I asked those questions. What do we want students to do upon the completion of this topic? Or what is your outcome of this assignment? Let's look at that. And then let's match the objectives to that and make sure that we're getting them towards that scaffolding and that self-directed learning, to where, throughout the course, we're not using verbs like identify, describe, right? At the beginning, maybe, but, you want to progress it, right, throughout the course, so that they can build upon that. And then by the end, they have that solid foundation, and then they can go into their next course knowing, yes, I have the skills I need to move forward. So that's so important. Yeah, I love that. It's great. Yep. And one of the things we have in our classes, I think you would like this, Hamza, is they have a DQ question at the very beginning. So they do, in our online classes, they do a class introduction, so we can all get to know each other and kind of build that community. But there's another discussion question. It's called Summary of Current Course Knowledge. And what students are asked to do during that first week is they're asked to look at the whole entire syllabus, look at the objectives, look at the assignments, kind of not really in detail, but just kind of get a holistic view of it and see, what do I know already? What do I not know, right? What knowledge do I not have coming into this course? And what kind of questions do I have, or what kind of discussions do I want to have with my instructor or my classmates? And I love when students do that. I mean, sometimes instructors or students think of it as just another thing they have to do. But I'm like, it's so important, because when my students answer that, and they do a good job of giving me that information, that helps me to tailor my instruction. So it's really great to see that, and what they have coming into the class, and then what I can help them, accomplish along the way. So it's a beautiful thing. It's kind of like what you were talking about with that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like knowing or testing the prior knowledge of your students is very important, because it will save you a lot of time explaining things they might already know, or they might do like they can save some time by preparing the class, preparing the subject of the class. Also, it will be a centered approach, or a student-led approach, maybe. To start with, like a discussion, so this way you can know what subject you should focus more on. You can assess their knowledge, like the different knowledge they have, different students, different level of understanding, and based on that, you start to fill these gaps they have, and make them reach to the material by themselves. For example, we do a lot of that in the discussion. We focus on any class discussion a lot in our approach in our center, because for example, the teacher will ask the students to research in the class, give them like 10 minutes to research or look up a topic. Then they present their findings and discuss it with the learners, with their peers, with the teachers. So this way, it's like, in instructional design, we have, in especially the scenario based style, we have the branching, So if the
Right.
learner will answer this, will give this answer, it will take them to cover this aspect of the material or the training. And if they answer this way, this means they passed a level. If we're doing gamification, for example, and so on. And you have to look for patterns where do learners ask for clarification, for example, or make the most errors about a topic. So you put your focus on that area, So it's, yeah, of course,
Right.
the knowing, having the knowledge about their prior knowledge, it's a good time saver, and it's very effective.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And I love that branching too. That's really great because they feel like they're taking control of their learning and they can make those choices and it's not made for them, right? Which adult learners love that,
Definitely.
right? They like to be
Yeah,
able
of
to
course.
make a choice in their learning and it kind of takes them on an adventure, right? Where they can say, okay, I make this decision. What are the outcomes going to be because of that? So yeah, I really like that. And I like too
Yeah.
what you mentioned about being able to see where they get tripped up the most and where do they have the most questions, or if you have a check for understanding, say somewhere in there, how many learners are actually having to go back and redo it, right? Or
Yeah.
and or if you have a quiz at the end, what questions are they missing the most? Yeah, it helps to have that evaluation piece, at multiple points in time and not just once, but continuously evaluate, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So,
helps with that continuous improvement. Yeah,
definitely, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So since ZPT helps us stretch without overload, which I really like that because this ties so much into cognitive overload. We don't want to
Hmm.
overload learners, but what's one simple method that can help instructors identify a learner's ZPD and match the scaffolds to it?
Okay, so just to give our learners a heads up about what we're talking about here, we're talking about Vygotsky's zone of
Yes,
proximal development, and the
right.
scaffolding also, which is another. It's said that it was taken from him, but let's just define the concept. Scaffolding is guided support given at an appropriate level. That's basically it. It begins with demonstration or example, and it's followed by student action with feedback along the way. Now, the ZPD is the potential held by an individual learner to go further than they might do alone. So the Vygotsky might say that in close collaboration relationship, the student is in the zone of proximal development. If it results in the learners learning more than they could by working independently, so it's a social learning by its concept. Learner happens twice. Firstly, from the outside in the social world, then secondly when it becomes internalized. And the language is the medium, the dialogue and the interaction, that they are the means by which the individual comprehend the social world. So we gave an example about we were talking about having like testing the prior knowledge and having discussions. So this is the social learning part. After that, the learner, what will do is, this is an example, of course, of or a simple method to answer your question. We
Mm-hmm.
talked about it, having discussions. So the learner will, after this discussion, they will try to internalize their own thinking and come to a conclusion where they make some ideas about what they learned. But it's very important to know when to answer and when to ask the questions. Uh, about the prior learning. When the students ask questions or um, uh, we are expected to answer them as instructors, right? But
Right.
what we do is we don't prefer, as, like I usually, when we discuss with our teachers, we tell them, do not answer the students' questions right away. Try to make them look for the answer. But it's very important to know when to do that. I remember in one of our, I do supervision meetings with our students like bi-weekly, just to check their performance, how they are doing, how, in general. So one of the students complained about this actually. He told me, like, when we asked the teacher, I was telling them, how is the teacher doing? How is everything? Are you doing well? They said, he said, like, when we asked the teacher, he doesn't answer us. He just keep asking us questions. I told them, yeah, of course, he shouldn't do that. You should look for the answer. If you cannot
Right.
find it, he will help you, because I understand what the teacher is doing, of course, because I do that with my students. But it's sometimes you just to know when to do that, you don't have to overdo it, sometimes just you need to give them the answer because they want it to they're not in the mood to search, they want, like ChatGPT. Remember we were talking in the previous episode about, like, just going directly to ChatGPT, just ask them question because it's easier and faster. They don't want to get out of their comfort zone and to do the hard work by thinking and searching. So it depends on, the instructor will assess when to do that. Now for the employees, it's the same thing, but it's with different tools. For example, once the ZPD is identified, we can match support based on what kind of gap the employee has. Is it cognitive gap, skill gap, confidence gap? If it's a cognitive gap, we can use guided questioning or job aids, things like that. If it's skill gap,
Right.
we can use demonstration, peer monitoring, things like that. Also, confidence gap, we can do quick wins, affirmation. So it depends on the context and what we are talking about here.
Right, exactly. Because we want to make sure it's not a one size fits all, and that we're tailoring the learning to what
Correct.
what those learners need. Right? Yeah, that's so important. I love that. Wow, and I love that example that you gave. That was great. The examples really help drive it home because it's almost like when we learn the models and the theories, unless we actually have an example or see it in practice, it's really hard to wrap your brain around it. So I love having those
Yeah.
examples. So yeah. So did you want to kind of dig deeper a little bit into the SDL principles as well, and kind of maybe talk about a type of assignment or maybe feedback patterns that can help increase that autonomy without overwhelming learners? Did you want to kind of go into that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. The SDL, we are talking about the self-directed learning, which is by Knowles. Its focuses on three key parts, which is choice, reflection, and feedback. The feedback is along the way, of course. Now, the goal here is to help learners learn how to learn independently, not to work alone. So what we can do is we can start with structured autonomy, begin with guided choices, options, but with boundaries, of course. For we give an example of choosing the topic remember in the collaborative project in the second year, they choose the topic, or they choose the presentation medium, for media students, for example. Then we can progress toward an open-ended autonomy. Gradually, we talked about gradual learning, or gradually release the control as learner build confidence and competence. For example, I teach a professional practice and course and a work experience course. Here we ask, in the assignment, we ask the students to write their own professional development, and they have to write their own objectives, their own goals. They have to put their own success criteria and build on it what they will do. And in work experience, they have to do it. So basically, work experience is a course where they have to spend 80 hours of actual work experience, like internship, apprenticeship, or shadowing, any type they choose. So here we are asking them to have control on their own goals and achieve it. So this will give them motivation also. For the feedback, we can promote reflections. It's very important. The reflection is very effective, actually. Instead of asking them, why did you do this? Or if you tried this approach, we can ask them, what led you to this approach? How would you evaluate this using the rubric you designed, for example, or the success criteria, and so on. But we have to balance freedom with support, because autonomy without guidance, it's abandonment, you know.
Right.
The teacher's role is very important. They have to be there. So they have to provide transparent expectations and feedback and checkpoints, not to leave the learners, okay, you have a deadline, after 3 months you have to submit this, and you have the autonomy. No, this is not autonomy, you know. They will be lost,
Right.
I assure you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we don't want to abandon them. Right.
Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that because, Knowles, self-directed learning is something I think that is not given enough attention, especially in adult learning. We focus on some other models and theories, right, in adult learning, but I think that needs to be something that we don't lose sight of. And even Vygotsky's, I think those are so important. But, I remember when I was in my master's program and we learned all about those. But then we put so much focus on ADDIE and adult learning theory and all of that. I mean, they all tie into each other. But yeah, I think it's so important not to lose sight of how important, Knowles brought that forth with that and to make sure that we don't lose sight of it. So that's great. I love that. So I'm glad we're going over that in this episode. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about like the LMS and different features that can help. So given that all these different tools, and we talked about this in the prior episode too, a little bit about the AI tools, but we want those to serve the pedagogy, of course, and not to just be fluff, right? Or eye candy, but we want them to really serve the students well. So how do you think an instructor or facilitator can decide when those LMS features like microlearning or AI copilots actually support autonomy and build that confidence for learners as well?
We have to agree that tools don't create autonomy. Design decisions do. We agreed on that, right. I think, from the last episode. We have to ask, does this tool help learners to take more ownership of their learning process or not? So in this way, we can set learning objectives. What kind of autonomy am I trying to build here? Cognitive, metacognitive, or behavioral? For the learning management system platforms, they can promote autonomy if used beyond content delivery. For example, we can do a progress tracking dashboards, which help learner to self-monitor, so they can assess themselves as they go and see where they are doing well and where they need improvement. Also, we just spoke about the reflective journals or discussion forums. They share their own experience with their peers and their instructors. We use that a lot in our courses also, which encourages also self-assessment and peer learning. Now, we can use also, we talked about the use of microlearning, whether for students or teachers in the teacher training. We use that in our LMS. So they can choose which micro units fit their immediate needs. For example, let's say a salesman is having trouble understanding the customer's body language, for example. And they have next week they have a deal they need to attend to or meeting with customers, things like that. So they want this specific topic to learn about the body language. So they assess learning, or they access learning, just in time, not just in case, So it's timely also. It's very important. Without a clear pathway, too many choices will be overwhelming if you provide them to your whether students or employees. Yeah. About the AI, it is powerful. We spoke about it a lot. It can be a remember. I remember you're referring it as a learner's partner. It's very important to look at it this way.
Mm.
Then they can use it to brainstorm ideas, get feedback on their writing, organize their material, things like that, or maybe assess them, or to deepen their metacognition. But they also need to share it with the coach or mentor or their instructor for advice. Not just to rely on it.
Right. That's so true. Yeah, it's interesting how my students are using AI tools, and some of the, I think we mentioned this in the last episode, some of them will think they're cheating, and so, well, you have your guardrails, so that's good. You're questioning it. But it's very interesting. I don't know if I talked about this in the first episode we did, but I have and it's something the university has too. It's a stoplight method for AI. So it kind of lets them know, okay, this is green, this is yellow, this is red. And so I have it in all my weekly announcements to say, here, and it's, it reminds them week by week. And I also attach a document from the university that gives them more guidance, because I think the more we can guide them, right, and let them know what those guardrails are, I think that helps set them up for success, so they don't go beyond what they should. Like, for example, reflections, right? That should be their own work. And they should not utilize AI for that, but they can use it for brainstorming, like you said, or outlining or something like that. So it's really important for that. Yeah. And then I've got certain announcements for specific assignments where they're tasked with using AI. And so it's really, really great to have that. So I think you'd appreciate this one assignment my students have in this class that I'm teaching, where they're doing this workplace training. It's for it's a fake company, but it's a technology company, where they have to do, it's about workplace safety and about ethics, workplace ethics. And so a lot of my students are in education, or they're in especially K through 12. So they don't know about corporate training very much, but they're supposed to work with the AI tool to kind of come up with some of those policies and procedures, and then create an e-learning. And so it's kind of neat, because they get to kind of get the AI to kind of say, okay, what kind of things should I work on, and what kind of things should I include? But they still have to use their judgment, right? And so it's very interesting to see what they come up with, and how the finished product is truly their own. I mean, they're still, they're using the AI to brainstorm, but at the end of the day, it's still their work. So it's really neat to see.
That's great.
How we're incorporating it. Yeah, it's really cool. And and the university has actually increased it. They want to have a threshold right now of where we want to incorporate AI as much as we can, because I'm hearing more and more. I don't know if you are in where you're working, but we're hearing in the higher education sphere, we're hearing how when you go out and ask employers, because we have a relationship with a lot of different agencies and employers at Grand Canyon. And so we ask them, we have employer surveys that we even do for graduates that get jobs. And one of the top things, I think it's like number 2 or number 3, almost always, is how to use AI technology in the job. So we know it's there, and it's not going anywhere. So if we expose our students to it and have them use it ethically, I think it prepares them for the workforce and for what's ahead, right, in the workforce. So it's really great. And then what do you think about having them do that even in training as well? Do you see where we can help bridge that gap a little bit more? So if they're doing it in their college courses, and then when they get that job, we can also train them in using AI ethically in their jobs as well, right? In that environment.
Yeah, definitely. This is very important we talked about the AI literacy or the digital literacy for both the teachers or the employees in their any sectors, or they have to learn how to use that, because they might get into trouble, or put their the company or the organization in troubles if they use it incorrectly. If they claim this is our own work, or if they like put some private or like privacy data of the company in the prompt just to brainstorm ideas. It's not allowed. So every organization should have their own policy, and also they should have their own training for their employees aside from the policies and procedures. I remember in my research, when in my desk study about using ChatGPT in education, I read a research a study done in programming for computing students. Uh, one of the instructors mentioned that I can't let my students use ChatGPT or AI generative tools to generate codes, because when they go to the when they graduate and go to the company, they might put their company in troubles, you know, because they have to come up and they have to create the code, you know. But here in AI, they are using a public codes, you know. So there's like a lawsuit risk in that area. So it's very important, as you said, to do trainings to prepare the students about what are the possible consequences they might face if they use it, misuse it, you know, misuse the AI tools.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. So important. Yeah. So, Hamza, as we wrap up this episode, I wanted to pose a final question. For someone who wants to start incorporating these principles that you talked about, maybe tomorrow or next week, into their courses or into their training, what's one small change you think they can integrate to most effectively increase learner autonomy?
If I think if there's one small change, I would suggest start asking better questions about how to increase learner autonomy by asking the who, the why, the when, the what, and the how. Because autonomy doesn't start by giving more freedom, as we said. It starts by understanding what kind of freedom the learners they need. So if we ask the who, it's about our learners, the learner themselves. If we ask who they are, students, employees, what's their background, their prior knowledge, we talked about that, their motivation, their comfort zone, their ZPD also, when we can help them, you know, these things. Not to assume, just look for the answers of the who, you know. The why connects to the needs analysis. In instructional design, we do a needs analysis. We can do that also to learn about the learner autonomy. Why does autonomy matter in this specific context? We can ask, why do these learners need to take more ownership? So it's very important to understand the why to ensure autonomy is purposeful, not just something trendy they should have. The when matters also because timing shapes readiness. Remember, we talked about when to ask or when to answer, you know, the students, and when to ask them, what do you think about this topic? Also, when the learners are ready to make or to take more control or to make judgments for themselves. Are they ready yet? We talked about the readiness. So now about the what. Now we're talking about the tools. We talked about the AI. We can ask what can actually support that autonomy. Is it micro learning, reflective prompts? These things. Now the how, it's how to we can guide them to in this journey. How will they scaffold or coach, or how we can do that. So in small change is really basically it's a mindset shift. So before you design the experience, ask the right question, because when you are intentional about these questions, autonomy doesn't just happen; it emerges naturally from thoughtful design.
I love that. Wow. Asking those right questions. So important. Absolutely. I love
Yeah.
that. Right. Well, thank you so much, Hamza, for showing us how calibrated scaffolds honor adult agency and keep progress steady, which is what we want as instructors, right? So in part 3, we'll wrap up the series by discussing how to redesign formative and summative assessments for AI-enabled classrooms. And I think this will be so key, especially now with the incorporation of AI in all areas of learning. So I think it'll be a fantastic way to wrap up the series. So I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. It'll be nice. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Hamza. And I look forward to having you back for part 3. We'll, and I know my listeners are looking forward to it as well.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you for taking some time to listen to this podcast episode today. Your support means the world to me. If you'd like to help keep the podcast going, you can share it with a friend or colleague, leave a heartfelt review, or offer a monetary contribution. Every act of support, big or small, makes a difference, and I'm truly thankful for you.